Hi, my name is Rich Bishop, and I'm the CEO of Midgame Consulting, and I'm on the Online ProsperityShow. In this episode, we'll talk about some of the hardships of becoming an entrepreneur and leaving a career to go in that entrepreneurial path. We'll also talk about the importance of community and growth and development with your teams as you move along. Don't miss it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we've got a guest whose journey is nothing short of inspiring. Rich, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. See, I've already started mincing my words, so I hope we're going to have a fantastic episode. But obviously, we're creating something remarkable based on the story that you experienced and the things that you're doing for others. So I can't wait to jump into this episode with you there. Now, for those that are watching right now, I want you to imagine being sort of at the pinnacle of your career, only to have a rug pulled from underneath you. Not once, but twice. That's exactly what our guest, Rich, had to experience. And it was this exact scenario that he actually faced, but he turned adversity into opportunity. So Rich is the founder and CEO of Midgame Consulting, a firm that's dedicated to transforming business through expert go-to-market strategies and operations. But Rich, it wasn't always like this. Take us back to the time in 2023 where everything just seemed like it was falling right in front of you.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I actually want to take us back just a little bit further, if I could, before that, just to set this up. I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur and always wanted to consult and to work with people. Leadership development has been a very big passion of mine for a long time, since I was a child. And I had the opportunity in the early 2010s to start a coaching and leadership development practice, but it was something that I was doing on the side while I was still working full-time as a finance manager in a large multinational company. And while I was doing that, I had two younger children at home, and to have a full-time job, be a plugged in, good father to my kids and involved with what they do, and then to try to start a business on the side, it was just too much for me at the time. So I set that dream aside at that point and said, no, I can take the leadership development tools that I have and the coaching tools that I have, and I can use that within my career to help build strong teams. So I focused on that, and at that point, my career took a big pivot where I was in finance, and I had an opportunity to move over to the sales team and start to build out a sales operations function at this company. And it went very, very well. So well, in fact, that I had other opportunities outside of this company to go into startups and private equity owned companies and really grow out those sales and revenue operations teams there. I was doing great with it, absolutely loved it, had a really good career going for me. And then that's when in 2023, unfortunately, the company that I was working for had to go through a series of layoffs. And they went through 3 different rounds of restructuring. And I was affected by that very first round of restructuring. So we had built a strong team. We really had a lot of momentum going. And then, as you said, yes, the rug was pulled out from under me in many ways. At the time, I was visiting a friend in Atlanta, I live in Tampa Bay, Florida, which is about an 8-hour drive from Atlanta. It's a short flight, but about an 8-hour drive. And I was there visiting with him when I got a phone call from somebody that worked on my team. They worked for me, and we had a great relationship. And he said, "Hey, Rich, did you know I was going to get fired today? I said, no, what are you talking about? He's like, well, an email went out and a bunch of us are apparently being let go today. Did you know this was going to happen? Almost accusing me. And I don't blame him at the time for that. But I was completely floored. I had no idea it was coming. So I called my boss and said, hey, did you know that this was going to happen? And as I was on the phone with him, he said, well, no, but as a matter of fact, I just got my email. It looks like I'm being let go as well. I said, whoa, none of this was expected. So he said, don't worry, you'll probably get a call this afternoon. The team needs you to kind of pull the pieces together. You're the leader of the group. I'm sure that things are going to be okay and you're going to get a call about how to handle this. And so I did get that call. And on that call, it was the COO of the company who then went on to explain all of the changes that were taking place. And I fully expected him to say, okay, and now how are we going to handle this? Except rather than following it up with that, he followed it up with, and unfortunately, your job has been eliminated as well. I thought, oh, not good. We had 2 teenagers at home at the time, getting ready to go to college, hopefully, right? And they're involved in activities. I can't have this situation mess with that. And so that night I was set to fly back home and went to the airport, and my flight got delayed, not once, not twice. Third time at about 11 o'clock at night, the flight was finally canceled. And after going through what I had been through that day, I just wanted to be home with my family. So rather than waiting until the next morning and hoping to catch a flight with everybody else that had been delayed, I said, forget that. I really want to be home. So I got a car from the rental car facility at the airport, and I drove the 8 hours home overnight with a lot of coffee to get me through the night. But I just wanted to be home, and I was able to be home and kind of be with my family that day to really start to process everything that had just happened. And then about a month and a half after I had lost my job, my wife's role was also eliminated from her work. And so now both of us are out of work, looking for how do we sustain the family and how do we keep things going with our girls who are so involved in all of these things. We don't want to take away from them and their development and what they're doing. And I had a consulting company on the side that I was doing a few hours a week for some people that I had worked with previously. And the jobs, as I was applying for jobs, just weren't coming. The opportunities just weren't there. So I looked at my wife and I said, I think I have to push on this consulting thing and see if there's something here. And she said, yes, do what you have to do. But obviously we've got to get something going here. And so I started picking up the phone, having conversations, and it ended up getting some great conversations, some really good opportunities from it. And now as we stand here a year and a half plus later, we're still going strong and building a consulting firm.
Well, congratulations, and thank you so much for taking us through that. I mean, obviously, it is your life story, and sometimes when stuff is happening, you really got to pay attention so that you will one day have a good story to tell, just like you have so done here. But I just wanted to take you back, just like you took us back a little bit. You did mention that you, as a kid growing up, you were very interested in leadership development and things of that nature. Was there any sort of influence around you where you would have seen that? Because I know a lot of kids that I ask, they either want to be a witch or a police officer or Spider-Man. No one wants to be a leadership development person.
Well, it was a little bit later. I was a teenager at the time, but I had a neighbor and a good friend of mine whose father worked for a big technology company locally. And he was a manager there and was involved in a lot of their leadership development programs. And at the time, he had a series of tapes, cassette tapes, that were really about mindset and the way to look at the world and a way to be successful and think like a successful person. And I was curious. So I asked him, hey, can I borrow those? I'd love to see what that's about. And that really is what started it for me. I listened to those, and just the different perspective of how to look at challenges in life and things that you'll confront with the right lens and the right way to look at it, you can actually learn something great from it and become even greater with the impact that you have on the people around you and with the effect of your own life by just really taking the right kind of approach. So as a teenager being exposed to that opened up my eyes to what was out there, and I was hooked. I dove into any kind of leadership development book or program that I could get my hands on from then on.
Absolutely. And this sort of really makes it, a little bit clear as to why that 8 hours didn't destroy you, because you were now in that car, stuck in your own thoughts, maybe contemplating, where did I go wrong? And why me? Why now? Knowing the situation that you had with the girls back home and things of that nature. And the fact that not only had that call happened, your flight was just being delayed and there was just no apparent reason why the universe was dealing you cards like that during that drive. What, besides the coffee, what's the one thing that really got you to keep holding on to that driving wheel, because somebody else would have just decided something else?
Yeah, and that can be a lonely place too, right? When you're in that kind of spot, usually the last thing you want to do is be alone. You usually want to surround yourself with people to help lift you up. Being alone in many cases is where falling into depression can come from sometimes in those situations. So for me, yes, I was listening to the radio, but I think in many ways I was replaying in my mind over and over again what had happened and what could I have done differently to maybe prevent this. And about halfway through the drive, I really, after I checked every single angle of what had happened, I came to the conclusion that there really was nothing that I could have done, right? It was a situation of where the company was and what the company needed to do in order to preserve cash so that it could continue to pay the people that were still there. So once I realized, okay, this really isn't about you, Rich. This isn't because of you, but what are you going to do with this situation? I could sit on the couch or sit at home for the next 2 months and worry about it and be upset about it. And frankly, to be honest, there were times where I was upset and didn't feel like moving and doing a lot, but you have to fight through those times if you're going to get out on the other side of it. And so it then started to shift to, okay, well, now what are my options? What am I going to do? Who can I call? Who can I talk to? What companies do I know out there that may be an opportunity for me? And it became a brainstorming exercise for me, the second half of that trip, to try to figure out what I was going to do next.
Absolutely. You see, what I really like about this is we're now looking at this in hindsight. And, if you have done the work, especially with the mindset and things of that nature, there's a general consensus that most of the things that happen, they're not happening to us, but they're happening for us. Had you not been maybe taken away from that particular place that you're in because you had already been dabbling with the business, would you have gone on and created this business, or would you have just kept it as a part-time endeavor that you were just, brewing on the side?
In hindsight, looking back, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if I would have started it, but the fact that it was already there made it a reasonable next step for me and something that came very quickly to me as an option, right? Because you want to look at all of the options that are available. Maybe some of them are not going to work. Maybe some of them can. And so it was, okay, let's get all of the options on the table and see what makes sense. And that was very clearly one that early on was there as something that I could potentially go after as a solution.
Absolutely. Well, while you were driving back home, I mean, maybe because it took so long, 8 hours, by the time you arrived home, your wife was also telling you her story. I mean, in terms of the time frame and things of that nature, how did you then both sit with that?
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough when you're both in that situation. You know, when I was going through it, I looked to her to be a rock for me, and you know, the stability and the encouragement that I need in that time. But when she went through it on her side at the same time, it was almost like, okay, my piece is not as important right now. I need to be here for her and for the girls. And so in a way, it flipped a switch for me that my concern for what was happening with my job was less of a concern now. I was more concerned about her and how she was feeling. So I don't know if it truly deflected my feelings or if it just suppressed them for a period of time, but it was something that my concern became more about her and what she was going through and being there for her as a resource rather than looking to use her as a resource to help me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And obviously, given the history that you've had, of you listening to those tapes and having experience with the mindset and having started on your journey, was that the same case with your wife? And, how much of like a risk taker would she have been in order for her to then say, you know what, let's just put together our resources and jump on and get started with something fresh?
Yeah, she is definitely not a risk taker at all. So it was one of those situations where I think stability is very, very important to her. And especially with the girls and the age that they are, to jump out and become an entrepreneur at any point in time is a risk. And it's especially a risk if you have a full-time steady career that has been working well for you. The assumption is that that steady full-time career is going to continue. And so it feels very safe until, as you stated, the rug is pulled out from under you and you're left to think, okay, maybe this isn't as safe as it appears to be. And so you really have to step back and second guess any of the assumptions that you have or the preconceived notions that you have inside about what is safe and what is risky. And when you're in that situation, there's a little bit of desperation there, although we weren't to the point of absolute desperation, but you get to the point where I want to find a solution here quickly. And if that means taking a little bit of a risk, the security of what's on the other side of that risk is worth the leap when you're in that kind of position to make it. So even if you are concerned with security or perceived security at that point in time, and I think that's an important distinction, as long as you can see what's on the other side of it, sometimes that risk is worth taking.
And is that still the same perspective that she still holds, or has that evolved with time?
No, she's grown very, very supportive of the situation and being an entrepreneur now. Now, obviously, as any entrepreneur out there that's gone at this, they know that there are ups and downs along the way, right? So you're going to have some great days, you're going to have some really bad days, and sometimes that can be tough, especially for a partner supporting you in those ups and downs. But she has been extremely supportive, and we've gone through this ride together.
Absolutely. And that's all you need. I mean, through thick and thin, you have somebody by your side, because it's not going to be easy. And especially the fact that you're transitioning mid-game from a part-time endeavor to a full-time setup where maybe you were trickling along with one or two clients, but now this has now become your full-time gig. Did you just hit the ground running, or was there a period where you're obviously trying to establish your brand and get people to actually then trust you with their business, because that's the thing that you're working on while you're trying to grow yours as well? It's like a catch-22 in the way that it would have unfolded.
Yeah, for sure. I was lucky in the sense that right from the beginning, I was connected with a private equity firm that had a large portfolio of companies. They had one company in particular that needed my help in a larger transformation type of project. There were a lot of changes going on at once on the sales and marketing side, and they were all things that I had done previously. So it was a great fit for me and it went really well. And because that went well, I rolled right into another one of their companies. So right from the very beginning, I was working on very large projects for these larger companies that were big transformational, transformational projects and work, rolling right from one to the next. I think in many ways, I assumed that that was going to continue. We had had conversations saying, hey, there really is a need here across a bunch of different companies to do this sort of work. And unfortunately, that second engagement, the priorities of the company were a little bit different than the work that I was doing. So that really wasn't a good fit, and we ended up breaking that off so that the company could really focus on what its main priorities were, which made a lot of sense. But the mistake that I made early on is that I was relying on that as the project basis, and for my sales and marketing was really that one relationship that I had. And so there was a bit of a downward a downward step that we took at that point because I had not been doing my own sales and marketing very much. I did not have smaller packages figured out, that smaller services and offerings figured out for these companies that maybe aren't ready for these large transformational type projects. But that's all I had been talking about in my materials and in the conversations that I was having. So there was a mismatch of how I could actually help the companies that had the need. And I had to go through a rough patch to try to figure that out and find out what are some of those services that would be the right offer for some of these companies that don't have a big transformational need, but maybe there are parts of their sales and marketing cycles that could use the help or could use the optimization so that they can get stronger growth, stronger revenue, whatever it happened to be at the time. So this was last summer, when all of that took place. And then right around the holidays last year, really started to figure that out and have been putting together some stronger programs now that are starting to really resonate in the market. And I've been able to help some companies really turn their sales and marketing systems around.
Absolutely. And obviously this wouldn't have been your fault because you're probably coming in from the big corporate that already has the branding, the systems, the framework, and the name, and you're just coming, to fix it. Whereas now you're coming in as rich, as Midgame, and everything lies on you. But your work sort of involves, the technical frameworks and processes to get things moving for business. All right. But you actually do emphasize on the importance of interpersonal relationships, which is a little bit different because so many people, when they're very technical minded, it's all about the processes and the systems and anything else, not worried about the actual driving force, which is the human sort of capital. How do you maybe balance these aspects and, create success or drive transformations for the clients that you work with now?
Yeah, there are a lot of companies, some of them very, very large in the consulting space, that do strategy very, very well. And they can go into companies and put some amazing strategies together. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is that the team members at those companies maybe don't buy into all of that strategy, or it's just not fully implemented all the way. So that strategy becomes a fancy book on a shelf that's just collecting a lot of dust a year later, 2 years later, right? I recognized this when I was working within some of these companies as a VP of revenue operations, where there were certain initiatives that we tried that a lot of work was put into putting the strategy together, but because it wasn't executed and it wasn't implemented well, we ended up spending thousands and thousands of dollars on these strategies that we didn't actually end up seeing the fruits of because they weren't implemented properly. So I think because of my leadership development background, I tend to focus on the impact that it has on the team members and making sure that the team members are bought into the strategy and have ownership in that strategy that's being generated, so that when it comes time to implementation, they want to do it. They want this change to happen because they know what's on the other side for them. And so for me, it really comes down to rolling up my sleeves and showing the team what good looks like, meeting them where they are, and walking step by step with them through implementing these changes so that they can see the benefits at the end when I leave and they are working in their business that they were working at previously, but now it's a better version of it. And they feel that and they sense that. That's really what drives me in doing what I do.
Absolutely. I like that, because so many people look at change as a threat, because then it might, whatever change that might come in might actually take away the job that they used to do, or it might actually mean a lot more work than they were doing before for not an increased, remuneration and things of that nature. And I quite like how you, like you say, roll your sleeves when you're working with teams, because you've gone on and developed your own team. And that has also been a great priority to the work that you're doing, even if it meant that, they would move on and do things elsewhere. How do you cultivate such a, how do you say it, a growth-orientated environment, especially within a business? And why is that very important for you, or for the listener who's just wanting to understand that aspect?
Absolutely. Growing and having a growth mindset is an important thing for anybody to have, right? And there's been a lot of studies on growth mindset and why that's so important to people. When I'm working with companies, or especially if I'm building my own team, a growth mindset is something that I'm looking for. I'm specifically looking for people who are naturally curious, who are wanting to learn, wanting to try new things, not necessarily comfortable in doing the same thing over and over again. And so that creates a lot of opportunity for people within the team and within, the broader organization. And so, yes, there have been times where team members of mine have had an opportunity to go somewhere else for a better role because they really embraced the growth mindset and the things that we were doing. I was genuinely happy for them to get these great opportunities, especially if we weren't able to provide those same opportunities to them internally. I really care about the people and their own lifestyle and growth. And if I'm able to help foster that in any way, shape, or form, that takes priority over, maybe some of the short-term needs that we have. Because ultimately, when you're in a position of leadership, you're in a position to impact the lives of other people, and you want them to get better. You want them to improve and be better because of the work that you did together, than if they were to just stagnate and stay the same and not create new opportunities for themselves. So growth is such an important aspect of what we do.
Absolutely. I like that, because I think it was Zig Ziglar that mentioned this, Rich. Help enough people get what they want, then you too will get that which you want, and a whole lot more, because when you do let them go, they will come across other pieces of business that they might bring back with as a token of appreciation. And it becomes a win-win sort of scenario. Now, for those that are watching, they might be keen on knowing the offerings that you've got at Midgame. I've noticed you've got a lead optimization roadmap that is geared to maximize the marketing ROI. Could you maybe walk us through what that offering is and how it actually helps companies, as we have said, maximize that return on investment?
Absolutely. From a lead generation standpoint, there are some companies that are very, very good at marketing. They've got great messaging, they've got great branding. Maybe some of them are really good at thought leadership and they're getting great content out there. But once that lead comes in, there are a lot of companies that leak leads, as we call it, right? Maybe their processes aren't set up very, very well. Maybe they're relying too much on people to hand over information or send an email to the right person or right to pass the information along. And maybe you're not following up in the ways that the prospect needs you to follow up. Maybe you're not providing that support. And when you think about the customer journey, right, and whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a software product, whether it's a service, you're taking somebody on a journey from being a prospect to a customer, hopefully to a customer that continues to buy and continues to refer you to other people. And I like to equate that to being on a train. If you're taking your customer on a train ride, but you're stopping at station A, asking them to get off the train to hopefully get on the next train to go to the next destination, and then they have to get off that train again on destination B and then go to the next train, it becomes a very choppy process for your prospect, but it also becomes an opportunity for them to get lost in the crowd at the station and miss their train. And as a company, you don't want that. As a company, you want them to be on that train ride from start to finish, a direct route, so that you're sure that they're there, that you're taking good care of them along the way, and they're going to be happier about that process overall. So with our lead optimization roadmap, what we do is we really review where are the leads coming in from, what's happening once they're there and once you have them, and are you truly taking care of them from the start of that process all the way through becoming a customer. And in that, we have some frameworks that we use to compare it to that are best practices in the industry that we can say, okay, here are some opportunities maybe for you to make some tweaks or for you to improve how the handling of the customer is to improve their journey. And then we provide a roadmap for exactly what that project plan would look like. If you are to implement this, here are the steps that we would recommend taking in order of the milestones that will have the biggest impact. So we provide you with that so that you can implement it yourself, or if you would like some expert help in putting those updated processes together, we of course can help you with that as well.
Absolutely. But, as you would understand, different industries have different journeys for their customers or their clients. Even though you want them to pay, stay, and refer, like you have said, let's say healthcare would have a different client journey to transportation or maybe food service. Food service, somebody just goes in, buys a burger, that's it, end of transaction. There's not a lot of, journey that goes on past that unless they come back tomorrow for the fries. You've promised them or things of that nature. But I understand you've probably worked in so many different, industries and stuff like that. How do you tailor these sort of processes so that they suit the industry that you're in? And have you been successful in a few that you can mention so that we can obviously understand how my Midgame Consulting operates?
Absolutely. When you step back to a high enough level, it becomes really about a couple of big buckets. It's about awareness. It's about attraction. It's about cultivating that relationship. It's about selling and really communicating your value and finding the value that you provide them to then hopefully have them continue to come back, and what are the steps that you can take to come back. So there are some bigger chunks that when you get down to a micro level and look really closely, yes, it may be different in food service than it is in healthcare technology, for example, of which I've spent time in both of those industries. And the overall themes are very, very similar to the process. How you execute it may be different, and what's important to a customer in food service may be slightly different than what it is to in healthcare. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to provide a valued service or a valued product to that customer that they need or that will help improve their lives in one way, shape, or form. And so at that point, it becomes about, okay, there are some different tactics that you may use from industry to industry, but there are some frameworks that you can look at to say, okay, overall, we're trying to find the right kind of leads and the right kind of targets for us. We're trying to attract them to us and make them aware of who we are. We need to understand their needs, and then how do we fill that need? And then how do we continue to serve them and delight them as customers moving forward so that they continue to come back, or they buy more, or they refer us to their friends who have similar needs. So tactics may be different when you get down into that, and that may vary by industry. But the overall themes and frameworks are really industry agnostic.
Absolutely. I quite like that because we all want the same things anyway, right? Health, wealth, relationships, and then the rest is now different variations just depending on the stories that we tell ourselves. Now, Rich, if somebody wants to see how Midgame can obviously help them with that, what would be the best way that people can get a hold of you?
Sure. The best way would be LinkedIn. I spend a good amount of time on LinkedIn. I post on there quite a bit. There's a lot of information and thought leadership that we put out there as well. On LinkedIn, if you go to linkedin.com/in/richbishop2, and that's the number 2, richbishop2, that will bring you directly to me. Please connect with me. I'd love to connect with you. Message me if there's anything that specific that you wanted to talk about, but happy to have a conversation and find out how your business is growing and what your needs are.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure that those links are in the show notes so that people can obviously get connected with you there and maybe start their journey that way. Now, Rich, when we started, you introduced us to you walking in the hallways of your office and having been told, your job no longer exists here. Which ironically is around about the time that they introduced AI and ChatGPT to the masses. Would you say maybe that had an effect in the turn of events, or was your company just going through the hangover of the pandemic? Because this is just run about the time when people were only just returning back to work and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, there was a big shift that happened toward the end of the pandemic time, where previously anybody that was getting funding from venture capital or from private equity, the focus was really growth at all costs. So we need to grow as quickly as possible, and it doesn't matter how much money you lose. We just need to grow, grow, grow. And that shift started to take place probably in the middle of 2022 or the end of 2022, right in that range, where really funding tightened up. And that meant that the criteria that companies were looking for when they were making investments really changed. And it shifted to profitability first. We want to grow, but only if it's done profitably. We don't want to grow at all costs and lose money and keep dumping money out the window, because at that point in time, interest rates had grown and money was more expensive. Loans were more expensive. So in that shift, there were a lot of companies that had taken on money in that growth at all costs timeframe, and they were working with that mindset that we're going to grow at all costs. And when they couldn't continue to take loans or couldn't continue to make money or take on venture capital, for example, they had no other choice but to start to move toward profitability. And that meant that there were a lot of layoffs that took place. So that, I think, is a coincidence about the timing of ChatGPT and how AI has really evolved. But AI really has helped me and has helped a lot of other entrepreneurs over the last 2 years or so now, as it's grown more effective and the use cases are starting to become more clear about where it's going to be useful and where it won't. I know that that's helped a lot of people, including me, in how they run their business and how they put their messaging, their marketing together, even for brainstorming and ideas of, how can we talk to this particular customer? What are the pains that this customer has? put an avatar or a profile together of my ideal client and help me understand them better. There are some really strong use cases there for ChatGPT and other tools to use them in that sort of way.
Absolutely, and congratulations. I mean, obviously, you things might have started off bleak, but you managed to use whatever rocks that were thrown at you, and you actually build a wall which you're now standing on. The one thing that you also introduced us to was, your family, and you couldn't stay. Was it in Atlanta where you were? You couldn't stay overnight in Atlanta to wait for the flight to come through, and you really wanted to be, around your daughters. And congratulations. I just looked up and I've noticed they're now become accomplished dancers. I mean, not only are you kicking goals in the business, but also as a dad and things of that nature. Have you also started learning to dance? Because you got to keep up with these girls now.
I will start that off by saying I train in jiu-jitsu and sometimes I compete in jiu-jitsu, but yes, every year the girls' dance studio at their recital does have a dad's dance that we all will dance, if you want to call it that. We move around on stage and everybody laughs at us, but the girls get a kick out of it. They definitely did not get their dancing skills from me by any means at all. But we have a good time with it, and it's a great opportunity to spend more time with the girls in their environment and in some of the areas that they love. So it's fun to be able to share that with them.
Absolutely. And congratulations, man. I've got 2 girls of my own and I can't even get them to eat breakfast. So if you are able to get them to dance, it's something else. But you raised something that's also very important, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't quite pay attention to, right? The community that you have around the jiu-jitsu, the community that you have around the dads and you growing, with the girls and things of that nature. And obviously you've also had some sort of entrepreneurial people that have been around, because I know for sure if you want to go far, you could go alone, but if you want to go further, you go together. Now, first of all, how did engaging with all these sort of communities impact your growth? And what sort of advice do you have to other entrepreneurs that might actually be feeling isolated in their ventures?
Yeah, isolation is a real feeling for entrepreneurs. You can get to the point, especially when things aren't necessarily going your way, that you feel alone, that it's hard, that maybe even you want to give up. And that's where community really comes in. I think I had mentioned earlier on the story about driving back. Normally, you don't want to be alone in those situations. And that particular situation made sense for me to be. But on a regular basis, community is so important and is such a big piece of it. There are people out there that have been through what you're going through, even though you may feel like you're the only one who's in this situation. You're not. Somebody else has been there before and they've been out on the other side. So even if it's just to encourage you to keep going, having that other person there to encourage you to move on, or better yet, having a mentor or somebody that can tell you, yep, I did that wrong, and here are the things that I did in order to get away from it, or here is what I learned. It's so much easier to learn business mistakes from somebody that's already made it rather than learning it yourself firsthand. So to have that community to encourage you and to help guide you along the way is just so critical. So if you don't have a community, I highly suggest finding a community of people that are in similar industries, that have similar interests to you. And as you said, even if it's just, the other dads, that are parents of your friends or your kids' friends, right? Finding that camaraderie and that community is going to be so important for you to be successful and to be able to continue on and grow in your journey.
Absolutely. And I value that, because so many people, subscribe to the Lone Ranger philosophy where they think they can go at it by themselves. But that whole self-made man is a myth. And speaking of self-made, Rich, this has been wonderful. I can't thank you enough for the time that you have taken, to showcase your journey and share with us what you've been doing at Midgame there. But it would be remiss for me to not ask. I mean, you've survived what would have been the hardest experience anyone would ever want to face. But what's next?
And we're growing. We are growing, and this is going to be a team that has an impact on the growth stage businesses of the world. So there's a lot to come. There's a lot of growing to do, and I'm excited for where we're going.
Absolutely. I'm high-fiving you all the way, man, because it definitely does showcase that you've had a strong start. And that's what's really important, because not a lot of businesses go past 1 year mark, 2 year mark, 3 year mark. And it seems like you are, ticking the boxes as you're going and also growing and expanding. So congratulations, my man.
Thank you, Prosper. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you for sharing your remarkable journey and insights with us today. And I think your story is a testament to resilience and also empathy and the power of a community. Now, for those that are watching right now, if you're eager to learn more about Reach and Midgame Consulting, I encourage you to visit midgameconsulting.com, or I will be putting the links to his LinkedIn in the show notes below. All right. I also encourage you not to miss our next episode, where we're going to be exploring ideas to enhance your happiness and well-being. And if you found value in today's discussion, please share this episode with somebody who could benefit from Rich's journey and his experiences and things of that nature. And while you're at it, just subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show, where you get tips and tricks on how to start, scale, and grow a business that's profitable and enjoyable. I want you to remember something. The journey to prosperity is better when shared. Until next time, bye for now.